Welcome to the show that explores the methods and strategies on rocking the financial side of your music business. With over 40 years combined experience, here are your hosts, Chris Webb and Dave Tampkin.
Welcome to Musicians Tip Jar, where we talk about musicians and money. Where we look forward to this hour of banter by the proverbial water cooler that is this platform. I'm Chris Webb, joined by my co-host and the most hydrated musician in Madison, Dave Tampkin.
I recently bought these hydration packets that had way too much salt in them. It was like a generic version on Amazon, and I thought I was getting myself a deal, but it was causing me more to pee more than I wanted to. So I was actually getting more dehydrated as I thought I was hydrating myself. Not a very good place to be.
Maybe that's just the age you're at.
Okay.
You're going to be in one of those commercials where they drive around in the convertible and they make frequent stops. Blame it on the salt water, Dave. Well, today we complete our chat with Front Range blues musician Mike Maurer. We discuss the journey we take to finding our style, showing the market your value, and keeping your heart on the most important part of being a musician. Today's quote comes from Mike Maurer. He said, "All the money and all the details will go away. What really matters is how you make people feel."
This week's nonprofit is Douglas County Youth Orchestra. DCYO was created in 2003 by a group of music teachers who wanted to provide the opportunity for students to be involved in music outside the school setting in Castle Rock, Colorado. It's a Colorado 501c3 nonprofit, non-discriminatory organization. They develop students' musical understanding, social growth, and self-esteem at a reasonable cost. Learn more at douglascountyyouthorchestra.org.
Our guest Mike Maurer is a Colorado-based musician who began playing guitar at a very early age, studying with Jock Bartley of the hit band Firefall. After his debut release, Chasing Pearl, Mike toured extensively, sharing the stage with acts such as Johnny Winter, Eric Gales, Tab Bonet, Earth, Wind and Fire, Richie Corzone, and Papa Chubby.
He only semi-played with him, right?
His long-awaited follow-up album is set for release in the fall of 2024. Aside from endorsements and regional awards, Mike is an excellent and seasoned performer, teacher, and all-around entertaining guy to come talk to. Let's have a good time. Let's go.
What projects are you currently working on? In your
oh man, we're recording now, Mike Maurer band or whatever. So I'm still doing that, and I'm kind of going on this Americana kick lately. We're talking about changing hats. I guess that's a theme, right? Or sunglasses. Now, even within performing and creativity, I like to do that too. Almost country, but not like the pop country, because that stuff, honestly, is repulsive to me. But like,
how do you really feel about it though?
Yeah, right. That's Sturgill Simpson and Tyler Childers, these guys. And it's funny because it mixes with the blues. It starts getting gray, and I know that sounds weird, but it really does. There's this big country bar in Franktown down here. Franktown's the next town over from Castle Rock, and asked me to play, to put my band together if I could play. And I'm like, well, not a country band. It's like, it's okay, you're just subbing. But they had no interest in rebooking, and I didn't have interest in booking because they have country acts. Went over good, man. It ended up being a regular thing. And we, from the first, our guarantee went up double than the first gig. It was a good example of how kind of it gets blurry, the whole, you have blues. Well, think about it, like Allman Brothers or something. Those guys are like Southern rock, and that Southern rock is basically blues and country.
Yes.
That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Allman Brothers would do that, and they cover blues songs, Statesboro blues and all that. But I'm into it, man, and that's kind of my writing now, and we're recording. So I'm excited about putting that out there. I'm doing a lot of duo work, so I'm alternating that was a good opportunity for me to alternate who I do duos with. Mm-hmm. So I'm experimenting with that a lot. I had this guitar. I have a guitar player, a keyboard player, another kind of front guy, which is fun. I've been going back and forth with that. It was really fun. But haven't had an album out in years, and it's amazing I get as much work as I do, honestly.
Yeah.
With having a product so old out there.
I think it's funny too that I relate so much to how your journey has kind of led you to this place you're at now. And I often think that I wouldn't have been ready, even though I wish that some of this had happened decades ago for me, being more conscious, more consciously aware of what I'm trying to do and taking advantage of my actual value, like you mentioned. I don't think I was ready for that, unfortunately, until a certain point. And you know that I struggled with addiction too. And it wasn't until I could see clearly what I wanted that it made it easier for me to let go of a lot of what was holding me back in this sort of like cycle of abuse, you know, that you put yourself through. And it's like you get to this point where you forgive yourself for all of that because you realize that the desire to be this artist that you are, is strong enough to get you through those things and get you to a point where now you understand how you can bring value, right, to the marketplace and be who you are, like all at the same time. Raise your value, 100%. But also be you.
And that's a great point, Chris. There's nothing I regret, man, because it's all about the journey. Your experiences bring you to your realization or the way you look at the world and where you're at. And if you're receptive to the experiences you go through. If I didn't go through those experiences, I wouldn't have the perspective that I do.
Yeah.
So I don't regret any of it. And you're right. I don't think I was ready. Like you, I wasn't ready at a lot of the points and to do what I wanted to do or whatever. Everything comes in due time and kind of brings you to where you're at and where you could be yourself and see the value unbiasedly. And that's what's tough, right?
Yes.
It's tough to take yourself outside of yourself and see what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what really helped me with that, man? You guys, I'm sure you've played gigs. Like these corporate gigs, you're like, you feel invisible, right?
Mm-hmm.
You say, I feel like I could just start cussing and or whatever, and just that nobody would know, and they're that oblivious. But years, when I was in college, worked like like a banquet server at the athletic club. It was like country club, and they had a piano player in the bar. And man, he had that same attitude, and it related to him. Like he's just like nobody cares. He's kind of this whatever. But on the other side, it provided such an atmospheric presence that was enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of it is going to be, oh yeah, you're awesome. It's easy to get used to that, right? Because it happens a lot when people come and give you these compliments, and you're like, well, they're not listening, then I must suck or whatever. But it's like you see the value. This is a long way of saying just like when you get outside of yourself and see kind of what you're doing, what you're offering, is a way to be confident in the value you're producing, you know?
You did this interview for Shout Out Colorado.
Uh-huh.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to just say one of your quotes so our audience could know what kind of musician we're with here at the end of this interview. The question was pretty much what sets you apart from others. And you said, aside from no two people are alike and everyone is unique, there's really not that much that you think that sets you apart, because in your mindset of unity, you don't think, how can you be different? The mindset is all together. Other musicians, artists are not my competition, but a person who shares the same passion, more of an asset than a competitor. The music community, for most part, is like that. We share gigs, we refer students, so nothing sets me apart. I'm happy just to be a part. And I think that's why you stay friends with people for as many years as you do. And for me, it was why when I did get that text from you just the other day, it was so nice to hear from you. So thank you very much for taking the time today to.
Oh man, I love the show. I really do. And Chris, you need to watch Multiplicity, by the way, buddy.
Oh, geez. Did you guys team up on that?
It's funny, dude. It was so funny that whole thing came up because I was like going back to like, I wish there was more of me. How do I grow my music business? when I only have a finite amount of time. I only have 24 hours a day. I got to sleep and eat. And I was like, I wish there was more of me, because that was so fun. And I thought of that movie before I even listened to the Dave's reference on the topic that day. It's funny, man, because I was like,
As long as you're not Doug. As long as you're not Doug, you're good.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Doug. Yeah, it's funny. It's really a brilliant movie. I mean, though his acting, because he's, all the different characters of himself is pretty funny.
Well, here's a very serious question. As someone who has listened to the podcast, and is there anything you want to tell our audience that I do really well and that Chris needs to improve on?
You're amazing. Chris needs a lot of work.
All right, that's our podcast, everyone. Thanks for coming out.
Boy, that was a quick one, Dave. I was like, whoa, stuck that in there. No, I think the podcast is incredible. I mean, if I didn't know you guys, I'd be a listener. I always think of this too. It's like there's this old. I don't know if you guys ever met Chris K, the GOAT. He's a longtime DJ. He just retired. He's a local guy, and he doesn't like podcasts. And I'm like, I and YouTube channels and everything. It's like, for what we do to not take advantage of the wealth of information that's so accessible is a mistake. There is so much out there for resources, and your show being one of them. It's a very direct resource. Think about it, guys. When we started playing guitar, there was no resource like this, like how to make money at music. There was like your old guitar teacher that maybe gave you advice or something. That's about it.
And most of their money mindsets were so negative. That is always the first thing we're combating is that we don't really believe what we've chosen as our passion is very profitable.
Exactly, but it can be. But you're right. It's all about the way we look at it. It's kind of an exciting time to be a musician, right? For the first time in pop music, we have the ability to make a decent income. Before it was garage band or rock stars, and the labels had all the control. I get the streams. I don't count on streams for income, really. It's like, it's coffee money almost. What it did do is take the power out of the labels, and it put the power to the artist. There's this book I'm reading now. It's called 1,000 True Fans. And it's an easy concept. And it basically says, if you could get 1,000 people to contribute, whether it's merch, a show, whatever, $100, that's $100,000 a year. And that's feasible. I could see that.
Totally.
I could see my reach to 1,000 people. It's easier than ever to reach 1,000 people.
Right. In fact, the more unique you are, the easier it is to make an effort to find those true fans.
I'm raising money for the album, crowdfunding, and I'm messing with that. And it was not easy to ask to do that. What that taught me was their fans, the people, they want to help. They jump on the chance to do that, man. They really want to support you. It's uncomfortable to ask or whatever, but I got over that. And then you ask, and they just are all about it. They love the chance to support you, whether it's a T-shirt or a ticket to a show or pre-saving your album or whatever. I think a lot of them vicariously live through you. We have complete accessibility to our fans. If it was 1975, I don't think I'd be making a living at this right now.
That's true. I agree with you. I think it's way more accessible for anybody to make any level. They can make a small amount, or they can make it their full-time thing, or they can blow up to where they're making millions. It's all based on your desire more than it's based on your accessibility, right?
Right. And it's just funny the way that society thinks about what we do too. There's this parent, so I teach both of their, like one of them piano, one of them guitar. We were just chatting. She's a nice lady. And she's like, you do this like full time for like a living? Like, that's it? That's all you do? And I was like partially offended. I was like, okay, let me just think of this differently. We still have that kind of stereotype, as it's a part-time living. Even though, man, this woman is shelling out $70 a week
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's $280 a month just for her kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I kind of, without insulting her, I was like, well, you know, you do that times 40, that's just lessons, not the band class, not the gig money or anything. And I think she started to kind of see, I think we're always going to face that.
Yep. There's a stat that just came out again, and this has just been updated, but the average person in the United States has a safety net of $400. There's like 85, it was like 85% of Americans have less than $400 saved for emergencies. And that number is shocking to me. It almost seems impossible, but that's what the stat said. And I think that what they also don't realize is if we can be smart and intentional with our money, we're already way ahead of anybody that no matter what their occupation is.
Mm-hmm.
If we've got some plan in place for our finances, we're playing with a lot less risk than a lot of other people are, regardless of what it is their occupation is.
Oh, totally, man. And there's always going to be a demand for it, you know. And then that, like going back to the corporate job, what that taught me is like, you know, I have a lead system for promoters and all my live stuff that I do, and for all the students. So it's like the follow-up, and that's what I think a lot of us don't do. My thing I'm working on is just taking time off, and
that's what you need to say to her. Your response should be, "Wait, you do a job, and no matter how hard you work, you get paid the same."
Yeah, right.
That doesn't sound very fair.
Yeah, exactly.
I usually say, "What the fuck did you say to me?" Just say.
What'd you say? You talking to me?
Never goes well.
Back in my 20s, when I was broke.
Right.
Now I get scared. I don't like when I have like 3 digits in my bank account. You know, it's like, ugh. I gotta get that back up. You know, it all changes.
Totally. So, well, you've been a great friend over many years, and I'm really happy to see you doing well and doing what you're meant to do. It's important that we recognize the fact that this journey is not easy, but that's not really the music's fault. You know what I mean?
No, it's life. Not.
And I'm sorry that you lost your brother. You know, it still hurts, and I'm sure that is something as part of this journey that is so unfair.
Yeah. You know, it's life, man. It almost makes music make more sense. It makes it more real, doesn't it? And it makes that what really life is all about, because we're just supporting ourselves with our passion. But the reality is all the money and all that details are all going to go away. Mm-hmm. What really matters is how we make people feel. Mm-hmm. We don't always have rewards for that. It's not always in our face. Mm-hmm. But somebody could be having the worst day in the world, and they come and you just affect them. That's what it really is about. And if we could keep a roof over our head doing it, awesome. People need music more than ever.
Yeah.
So tying into that, you know, the whole death and life and all this stuff and details will all go away eventually.
Yeah.
But music's eternal, and that's more connected to what we're really here doing anyway.
Yeah.
On the earth.
Thank you for being on the show and giving us your time.
I appreciate it. I'm a big fan. I really am. Keep going. Oh, you know, one thing I wanted to say, when you guys had that episode about tips was discovered quite a bit, and how you look at tips. That same night, man, I listened to it on the way to the gig. If you guys ever had this, it was kind of funny. It's always an older person, like, no offense to the older people, but they do the Venmo and they scan it and are there, and they make sure that you see them do that. Mm-hmm. You know, like, I'm tipping, and then you just never get the Venmo. You guys ever do that?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the one thing that's like a new age thing, right? Because when you put money. It's physical.
Yeah.
You put it in the tip jar, but they always do this, like, I want to show this guy that I care for him, and they scan, and you just never get it. They just walk out and be like, well, I got the gesture, but I really didn't have to pay for it. Yeah. I think it's kind of funny when I see that.
Yeah.
That in itself is a good tip for this show. We can save money moving forward by just showing musicians our gratitude by pretending to tip them.
But it was great. I didn't even think of doing the QR code of the link tree. Mm-hmm. That was a suggestion that came up on the show. Mm-hmm. It's like, let's do the QR code. That's the way it's everything. The website, the Venmo, all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I love the show. It's like stuff that I don't think about. Your show is like a seminar for musicians, I think. It's like topics that come up that I need to think about. Because really, we have peers, but we don't have co-workers.
Yep.
It's kind of a one-man thing. So listening to the show kind of opens up and like, oh man, I never thought of that, which is great.
It's not like money is the easiest conversation to talk about anyway.
Right. Exactly. Especially when you're asking for more money for a performance you're doing. It's a delicate line that you need to learn, It's a skill set that's it's not written. You just got to kind of feel it out,
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, it was awesome. Keep up the show, man.
We'll do. As long as you keep listening. We'll talk to you again soon.
I will. All right.
Cheers.
I recently saw Mike post on another musician's post saying, hey, I'm starting to play music full time again and looking for new projects. And he wrote right away, I'd love to play music with you. I have a few gigs open that we can do a duo set on. And this guy jumped all over it, who I know can pretty much play with anyone in Denver. But it was nice to see that Mike was the first response. And their music styles are so different that it was nice to see that Mike wasn't willing to define himself, but was more looking to play with this individual than anything else.
That must just be the energy he puts out. He's willing to take on these new adventures. And I think a lot of times when we're stuck in our style, it's more that we're worried we're not going to be good enough to play with somebody else that's perhaps a different style. So that's hats off to him for that, for sure, because I do think that can be intimidating.
He's so nice when he reaches out. And funny enough that you and I were talking 2 weeks earlier about asking Mike if he wanted to be on the podcast. And he heard the previous podcast, like he was saying, and just said, hey, I was wondering if you had the same number, wanted to say hello, listen to the podcast. And right away, I was like, oh, thinking about you. Do you want to be on? And he's like, well, I wasn't reaching out to see if I could be on it. I'm like, no, it's just so ironic that you're reaching out now after we were just talking about you. So it was nice to reconnect.
What I enjoy about having a guest like Mike on is that he's in the trenches often like we are. Sometimes we're talking to these artists that have gotten into the bigger trenches. I don't know how you say that. They've gone on to do larger events, larger situations, larger scenarios. And I think as the community, sitting here talking coworkers around the water cooler, it's important that we feel that we're all represented at all the different levels that we're at, and that we're all validated, that this is still worth the choice we're making and the efforts we're putting into it.
And nice to know that you can reach out to the people you started doing this with, regardless of where they're at. We can go on to another topic you don't know too much about, multiplicity.
I can't believe he brought that up too. Well, you would be proud that the other night I got home from a gig and I watched that movie on YouTube.
Come on. Did you?
I have a couple things to say about that. First of all,
you don't seem too impressed. I can tell already.
I mean, Michael Keaton does a great job. But truthfully, my kids could never watch that movie. His clones all have sex with his wife.
They were different times, Chris.
My kids are
we were younger. It was different times.
In the end, he never tells his wife what he did. Like, the whole thing is like a giant secret he's totally fine with. He just, the seriousness of the situation is never realized in that movie.
Doug did not have sex with her.
Yes.
He did?
Yes.
Oh, I have to go back. Now I want to watch it again.
All in the same night. It's kind of messed up.
I'm glad that you were able to relate the points that we were trying to make on this podcast. And all you got out of it was that his wife had a great time.
With 4 clones.
One was called Papa Chubby.
Well, it was also nice to get some feedback from a listener asked about the show on the show. He could have definitely insulted us, and he chose not to. And it's also nice to know that we are connecting. I mean, that's kind of why we wanted to call this episode "We Are Coworkers," because the truth is, we, like Mike said, we don't really have coworkers. We don't go into the office and sit next to other coworkers and chat about our weekend and then, do that the same way. It's very untraditional, but it's important that we feel that sense of community here at Musicians Tip Jar. I'm not exiting the show here. I'm just making the point that has a purpose, that it really is intentional that we're saying that, because we are trying to create that water cooler atmosphere that we can all talk about what we're trying to work for and what we're trying to do. And between projects and personal life, that we can feel that comfortability here.
I found the one thing he said that we can do an episode on in the future was how to be a good band leader. All I could think about was all the mistakes I've made in my life being a band leader that I wish I could have done differently. I'd love to share it. And hopefully whoever I play music with could take that as a public apology in some way or another on how I wasn't qualified. I just didn't know at the time. And I'm a smarter person now than I was back then. And I would have never done some things, or at least handled it differently,
Yeah. So many of our bad choices are always made on fear. I think that's where I can trace a lot of my bad leadership in the past for many levels, different circumstances. I think if I trace it back, it was me being afraid I was failing, or me being afraid I didn't have enough, or me being, the scarcity mindset, or protecting. There's always such a fear when you're creating so much. It's always like a fear that you're going to lose the rights to your music. There's so much fear about that. And I talk to students about that a lot, because it's part of what they use as an excuse to not put anything out. Mm-hmm. And it's because they really think that the fear of somebody stealing their stuff is that real. And I'm not saying that it's not real, but the copyright protections are very much there to protect us from any of that ever happening and it's really a compliment if somebody's stealing your stuff. And along with the band stuff, it's like being afraid to communicate effectively and make agreements ahead of time is because I was always afraid I wasn't going to make enough money and pay everybody fairly. But yeah, that's easily a whole episode in leading a band. Or just being in a band at all the different. We could have members you could have all different instruments of a band come in and just argue it out on a show.
This content is rated explicit.
We chose to be on Zoom so no one got into physical arguments. But educating the public, I think, is kind of what we're trying to do here, but we're also educating ourselves, as we always say. But the truth is that all this opportunity to learn, all this content, all this advice, all this insights, they didn't exist 25 years ago. Like we said in the interview, that we did not have the opportunity to get free access to this information before. So how were we supposed to know? The only thing you ever had to do was look at the successful artists that you wanted to be like. And by the way, half of them were drunk all the time. At least they made it look like they were. So that was part of your excuse of why you did that too. There was no water cooler talk sitting around being like, hey, you should be sober. It would be a lot more effective.
And if we got advice from anyone, those people were in corporate situations and probably gave good advice that, we didn't listen to so much at the time, but it was very clear that, hey, have a contract or talk about it, sign a piece of paper, follow through on what you said you were going to do. You said this, follow through. Sorry if you didn't get paid. It's your fault.
Mike has a unique story with his challenges, losing that weight and working through those challenges. But I think the element that really hits home the most is when we lose family members. And, I know you have too. It really does, I think, wake up certain ability to see life differently, or maybe to take value in what matters the most. Mike said it very powerfully when he said that it made him closer to music. It made music mean more. And I really love that. It's a healer. Music is love. Music is so many things that we forget because we're out there playing the same covers all the time. And the way he brought it back, it hit me. It reminded me that, yes, this matters on so many deeper levels that we forget, or that we just don't have the capacity to be aware of all the time.
Well said.
So I guess we just want to make sure that we want you to know your coworkers, Dave and I, are here And anytime we want to meet at the water cooler, we'll be there because we know that this community thing is important and it's helping us all to not give up and to feel validated for our efforts. Today's action step is to make a short list. Okay? Short list. This is still one action step. List the top 5 income stream sources that you have right now in order of their amount. Now take the 4th and 5th, the lowest 2, and let's come up with 2 ways to take those revenue streams and move them up maybe a slot on the list. And this shouldn't mean spend a lot of time doing these things, but the answer should be in how to show those areas more of your value so that it can increase. An easy example of this is our discussion of the tip jar QR code that we had and having multiple tip options within one QR code. And Mike brought this up. This instantly shows results for me. It did the moment I put it out there. So I believe it can work for any performing musician out there too. So if that shows up tips as number 5 on your list, this is an easy one for you to move it on up. We know how valuable your time is, and we appreciate you spending this time with us and being a part of this community. It's our hope that you feel that sense of community here at Musicians Tip Jar and that you'll help spread the word to make us all stronger. Let's get this water cooler growing. If you'd like to get a hold of us, what's the best way to do that?
If you want to hear more of Mike, check out MikeMaurermusic.com, MAURER. Send us an email, musicianstipjar@gmail.com. Website, musicianstipjar.com, where you can check out all the resources and discounts we have collected just for you and check out all our episodes now on our YouTube channel. If you find this information useful, please rate, subscribe to the podcast, and like this video, and subscribe to the video if you're on YouTube. We can help keep you up on the finance side of your music business.
As always, thank you for joining us. And remember, there is enough for everyone. You just need to know how to get it. Until next time, on behalf of Dave Tamkin and myself, Chris Webb, stay happy, healthy, and wealthy. We are all co-workers, so let's do some team building and help support each other. Because if you do better, we all do better. This is Musicians Tip Jar.
Oh Lord, I could use somebody. I could use somebody.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, business, or financial professional for individualized advice. Individual results are not guaranteed, and all discussed strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The hosts are operating on behalf of Musicians Tip Jar LLC exclusively.
Use a little help here. Could use some help. Could use a little help here. Could use some help. Could use a little help here.